I woke up suddenly to the sight of flames crawling up the glass of my bedroom window. The orange glow and the crackling sound told me immediately someone had set my shed on fire. Inside that shed were the only documents standing between me and losing my home, my proof of ownership, my legal papers, everything that mattered to protect my family's land. And deep down, I knew exactly who wanted those documents gone. It all started with the fence. My father, bless his soul, built it with his own 2 hands half a century ago, cedar posts sunk deep into the earth that's been in our family for 3 generations. After my Emily passed 2 years back, the quiet of our little house on the edge of woodland pines became my sanctuary. The old barn, the sprawling oak Emily loved, that fence. They weren't just wood and land. They were memories. A life. I'm Walter Grady, a retired engineer, and I figured I'd live out my days in peace. But peace, I learned, is a fragile thing, especially when a homeowners association decides you're an eyesore. The letters started arriving like clockwork, crisp white envelopes bearing the Woodland Pines HOA logo. Nancy Whitmore, the president, a woman whose smile never quite reached her eyes, always dressed like she was about to host a garden party even if she was just getting her mail, was the name signed at the bottom. First, it was a polite request to repaint the fence. Violation of neighborhood aesthetic standards, it declared. I'd chuckled, tossed it on the pile with the junk mail. My fence had character, not decay. But Nancy wasn't the chuckling type. The letters became demands. Fines started appearing. 100 for unkempt lawn edges, $250 for a mailbox that wasn't their approved shade of beige. It felt like they were inventing rules just to target me. I live on a fixed income. These weren't small sums, but I mostly ignored them, a stubborn old mule refusing to be led. Emily always said I had a streak of that. Just be careful it doesn't kick you back, Walter, she'd tease, her eyes sparkling. I missed that sparkle more than words can say. Then came the letter that made my heart hammer against my ribs. I was out in the front yard, the late summer sun warm on my face, when the mailman handed it over. Thick, official. My hands, weathered from years of work, trembled as I unfolded it. A $50,000 fine for the fence. And if I didn't pay within 30 days, they'd begin foreclosure proceedings. $50,000. They wanted to take my home, my father's home, Emily's home over a fence. My fists clenched. This wasn't about aesthetics anymore. This was a land grab, plain and simple. Nancy Whitmore and her cronies thought they could just push an old widower around. They thought I was a relic, easily swept aside. But they'd overlooked something my father, with his quiet wisdom, had ensured. They never bothered to check who owned the winding 1.2-mile road that was the only way in and out of Woodland Pines. They just assumed it was public. It wasn't. It was mine. My old friend David, a sharp lawyer who, funnily enough, had once been one of my students decades ago when I was guest lecturing on structural engineering, nearly fell out of his chair when I laid everything out for him. His eyes grew wide, and a slow grin spread across his face as he took in the full picture. "Walter," he said, shaking his head in disbelief but clearly amused, "they want to play hardball over a fence, and you own the entire ballpark entrance? This isn't just a small fight. This is going to be biblical." The pressure mounted. I started noticing a slick young man in expensive suits, Garrett Tomlinson, hanging around Nancy. He had that hungry wolf look, all charm on the surface but cold eyes. I'd see them huddled together after HOA meetings, heads bent, whispering. Mavis, my neighbor from across the street, a lovely woman in her 70s with a garden full of roses and an observant eye, mentioned seeing Tomlinson's fancy car outside Nancy's house at odd hours. "Something's not right there, Walter," she'd said, her brow furrowed. "That man looks like he's selling snake oil, and Nancy's buying it by the gallon." Then things got uglier. My beloved golden retriever, Daisy, vanished one evening. For 12 frantic hours I searched, my calls echoing in the empty woods. The next morning, a neighbor found her, scared but unharmed, locked in an abandoned van a few streets over, along with 2 other missing pets from the neighborhood. No proof, of course. Just a sickening feeling that they were trying to break me piece by piece. The night the shed burned, I woke to the smell of acrid smoke and the terrifying orange glow flickering against my bedroom window. My heart leaped into my throat. The old wooden shed in the backyard where I kept my tools, Emily's gardening things, and, crucially, my copies of the land deeds and legal papers David and I had been working with. I stumbled outside, the heat hitting my face. Flames licked up the sides of the shed, devouring 50 years of history in minutes. The crackle of burning wood, the roar of the fire, it was a nightmare. By the time the fire trucks arrived, it was too late. The shed was a smoldering ruin. My papers, my proof, gone. Or so I thought. A young police officer, Lindsay Carson, stayed behind after the fire trucks left. Her face was kind, familiar. "Mr. Grady?" she asked gently. "I'm Officer Carson. I think I was in your daughter's class in high school. You helped us build that trebuchet for the science fair." A faint memory surfaced. A bright, eager kid. "Lindsay?" "Yes, I remember." Her expression was serious. "This doesn't look accidental, Mr. Grady. The way it started, so fast. I've put in a word with the arson investigators, but these things take time." She hesitated. "Is there anything particularly valuable they might have been after?" My stomach twisted. "My land documents. Proof of ownership for a certain road." Lindsay's eyes widened slightly. She nodded, a silent understanding passing between us. "I hope you had copies somewhere safe." My mind raced. Copies, the originals. Where? And then it hit me, a memory of Emily, years ago, her hand in mine. "Walter," she'd said, her voice soft but firm. "Some things are too precious to leave to chance. We need a safe place." The bank. We'd taken out a safe deposit box after a minor burglary scare in the neighborhood. I hadn't thought about it in years. The next morning, my hands still shaking from the fire, I drove to the town's oldest bank, the one with the echoing marble lobby. The clerk, a young man who looked like he was barely out of school, led me to the vault. The heavy steel door swung open, and there it was, our little metal box untouched by time. Inside, beneath some old savings bonds and Emily's mother's pearls, was a thick manila envelope. My name was written on it in Emily's elegant script. I pulled out the contents. The original notarized deed to the Woodland Pines access road, clear as day, and tucked behind it a smaller sealed envelope. My heart ached as I recognized her handwriting again. I opened it. A single sheet of paper. "My dearest Walter," it read. "If you are reading this, it means the world has turned a little cruel, and you're looking for strength. Remember your father's wisdom, and never let anyone take what is rightfully yours. Your true power isn't just in deeds or land, but in your integrity and the love we shared. That no fire can touch. I'll always be with you. Emily." Tears welled in my eyes. The smoke, the fear, the threats, they all seemed to recede. Emily's words, her foresight, her love. It was like a shield. They hadn't beaten me. They'd just made me remember who I was and who I was fighting for. Armed with Emily's love and the deed clutched tighter than my blood pressure meds, I walked into that community center like a man carrying a holy relic and a grudge. The weight of years and memories pressed on my shoulders as I stepped through the doors, the murmurs of the gathered crowd swirling around me like a storm. Faces turned, eyes narrowing with curiosity and judgment. The air was thick with anticipation, electric with the promise of confrontation. The HOA's emergency meeting, TM, had the exact same energy as a 1980s soap opera finale, tense, dramatic, and full of unspoken threats. Every whisper and glance felt like the prelude to a battle. All that was missing was someone dramatically slapping someone else with a glove, and the room seemed ready for that kind of theatrics. The place was packed. Wall-to-wall lawn-perfecting, cardigan-wearing residents buzzing like someone had spiked the lemonade. Probably had. Mavis was front row center, arms crossed and expression locked on Nancy like she'd come for the gossip and stayed for the execution. Officer Lindsay Carson was near the exit, arms folded, keeping her cop face on, but I could tell she was rooting for me. Then in strutted Nancy Whitmore, HOA Queen of Doom herself, wearing a white linen suit so starched it could deflect bullets. She looked like she was about to host a garden party at Versailles. Garrett Tomlinson followed close behind, dressed like a Banana Republic mannequin who'd just discovered real estate fraud was his kink. Nancy tapped the microphone with 3 perfectly manicured fingers, slow and deliberate, drawing the room's attention. Her voice slid over the crowd like thick syrup dripping onto poisoned pancakes, sweet on the surface, but full of bitterness underneath. "Thank you all for coming," she purred, her tone smooth and calculated. "We're here tonight to address a serious issue concerning Mr. Walter Grady's persistent refusal to comply with community standards." Persistent refusal. She said it as if I were a troublemaker tossing wild raccoons into neighbors' yards, not a man simply living in his own home. She launched into a long list of so-called violations. The fence that didn't meet aesthetic guidelines, the lawn edges deemed too unruly, the mailbox painted in a shade not approved by the HOA's ever-changing palette. The crowd reacted with little gasps here and there, some smug head nods, especially from a particular couple in the front row who had once fined another neighbor for hanging a seasonal wreath that, brace yourselves, had glitter on it. "Which, with penalties and fees, now totals over $52,000, Nancy announced with a triumphant smile, as if delivering the final knockout punch. There it was, the HOA's death blow. $52,000 for refusing to turn my home into some live-in Pinterest board curated by bureaucrats. She pivoted toward me, her smile thick with smug satisfaction, so sharp it could curdle milk. "Mr. Grady has been given every opportunity to remedy these issues. Regrettably, we must now consider foreclosure." I could practically hear Garrett Tomlinson's jaw clicking as he clenched his teeth, anticipation written all over his face. Like a vulture dressed in a silk tie, he was ready to swoop down and snatch up my land the moment they had the chance. I stood, slow, deliberate. My knees made a sound like an old screen door, but my spine stayed straight. I held my leather briefcase in one hand, the same one Emily had given me the day I retired. When I placed it on the table, it made a satisfying thud, like I was about to open the Ark of the Covenant and melt a few HOA faces off. "Nancy," I said, keeping my voice calm, "you talk a lot about integrity, about community values, but I think it's time everyone here knows the real value you're after." Her eyes narrowed. "This isn't the place for—" "It's exactly the place." I clicked the latches, slow, dramatic, theater-worthy. Then I pulled out the original deed, Emily's gift from beyond the grave, and held it up like a judge with a gavel. "This," I said, turning toward the room, "is the original notarized 1974 deed to the only road leading into Woodland Pines. It was never public. It was never HOA. It was passed from my father to me." There was an audible collective inhale. Someone in the back whispered, "Wait, what?" "Which means," I continued, "for 50 years, I've let this neighborhood use my road, for free. No complaints, no tolls. But now Nancy and her friend here," I tilted my head toward Garrett, who looked like he was trying to disappear into his designer lapel, "have been quietly planning to rezone my property and build a luxury entrance to boost their real estate racket. Behind your backs, over my land." You could hear a pin drop. Then Mavis, bless her firecracker soul, stood and blurted, "I knew that new gate sketch looked like a Vegas casino entrance." A few people laughed. Most stared, stunned. Garrett tried to speak, but I wasn't finished. And when I wouldn't roll over, when I got a lawyer and started pushing back, my shed mysteriously caught fire, all my documents gone. Except they weren't. I tapped the deed. Thanks to my late wife's common sense and a bank vault. Nancy's face was twitching now. Her jaw tightened. Her eyes went glassy. I laid out the zoning documents David had uncovered, all of them showing plans filed quietly with the county, stamped and signed. Folks, I said, quieter now, this was never about my fence, or the mailbox, or the lawn. It was about leverage. A $50,000 crowbar meant to pry me off the land so they could pave over it. They nearly succeeded. Nancy opened her mouth, probably to lie or self-combust, but all that came out was a choked gasp. Then it happened. Her hand flew to her chest, then her head. It's not... Her legs wobbled like cheap patio furniture in a windstorm, and just like that, the queen of HOA drama collapsed right there on stage, straight down, like a linen-draped Jenga tower. Someone screamed. Officer Carson leapt forward. People surged. Garrett, the human weasel, tried to slip toward the back, but a man near the door stepped in front of him with a look that said, "Try me." And I stood there, still holding the deed. Did I feel triumphant? Not exactly. Just settled. Emily's voice echoed in my head again. Your power isn't just in land, Walter. It's in how you protect what matters. So that's what I did. I protected it. With paper, patience, and the quiet rage of a man who'd had enough HOA nonsense for one lifetime. Nancy's smile wavered. Walter, this is hardly the time for theatrics. If you're here to pay the fine... I'm not here to pay a fine that was manufactured to steal my land, I interrupted, walking towards the front. I opened my briefcase on the table Nancy had been using, the click of the latches loud in the tense room. You see, folks, this isn't about a fence. It was never about a fence. I pulled out the original deed to the Woodland Pines access road, the one Emily had kept safe. I held it up. This document, dated 1974, proves that my father, when he sold the land for this development, retained sole ownership of the 1.2-mile access road. The only road in, the only road out. It's private property. My property. A collective gasp went through the room. Nancy's face went pale. Garrett Tomlinson, sitting in the second row, shifted uncomfortably, his slick composure starting to crack. For 50 years, I continued, my voice ringing with emotion, my family has allowed everyone in Woodland Pines to use this road, free of charge, as good neighbors. We never asked for a penny. But Ms. Whitmore and her associate, Mr. Garrett Tomlinson... I pointed directly at the developer, whose face was now a mask of fury. They didn't just want my fence gone, they wanted my land. They have secret plans to rezone my road, build a new luxury entrance for a development deal that would line their pockets, and they figured an old widower would be easy to push out with trumped-up fines and threats. I then laid out copies of Tomlinson's preliminary zoning applications David had unearthed, showing the proposed development right over my property lines. And when I wouldn't break, I said, my voice thick with anger, when I started to fight back, my shed was burned to the ground. They tried to destroy my proof, to intimidate me into silence. I looked around the room at my neighbors. This isn't about community standards. This is about greed, corruption, and abuse of power. Mavis stood up, her voice trembling but strong. He's right. Nancy Whitmore has been bullying people in this neighborhood for years. We've all been too scared to speak up. Fines for bird feeders, threats for holiday decorations. It was never about the rules. It was about control. Others started to murmur agreement, then to speak out. Story after story of petty tyrannies, of unfair fines. The dam of fear had broken. Nancy Whitmore stood frozen, her face contorting. She opened her mouth to speak, to deny, but only a choked sound came out. Her perfectly applied lipstick seemed garish against her suddenly ashen skin. She swayed, one hand flying to her chest, the other to her temple. It's not true, she stammered, her eyes wide with panic and disbelief. Then her legs buckled. She crumpled to the stage, a small, defeated heap. Chaos. People surged forward. Officer Carson was instantly by Nancy's side, checking her pulse, speaking calmly into her radio. "Get paramedics here now. Possible stroke!" Tomlinson, seeing his scheme implode and his partner collapse, tried to melt into the panicked crowd. But I saw Carson signal another officer at the door, who subtly moved to block his exit. Nancy Whitmore survived. Mini stroke, they said, not major, just enough to short-circuit the HOA Queen's command center and knock her out of action. By the time the ambulance rolled out of the driveway, her rule had already collapsed like a flimsy deck chair caught in a violent thunderstorm. Quick, messy, and completely undone. "She's conscious," Officer Carson told me quietly, her voice low as if sharing a secret. "But probably shouldn't run any more empires, at least not for a while." "Shame," I muttered under my breath, a dry smile creeping across my face. "I hear HOA dictatorships have excellent retirement packages." Garrett, gone, vanished, poof. Last anyone saw, he was trying to bribe a paramedic with what I can only guess was a business card and maybe a Groupon for shrimp cocktails. Not exactly the master plan of a real estate developer. His luxury gate fantasy, dead in the water. After the fire report came in and a few pointed, stern conversations with zoning officials, thanks to Officer Carson's conveniently forwarded emails, Garrett's investors abandoned ship faster than teenagers fleeing a landline phone. The rest of the HOA board? They melted away like snow in July under the heat of truth and exposure. One poor guy even left a note on my porch that said, "Sorry, didn't know she was planning to seize land. I thought the fine was for weeds." Sure, Ted. And me? I stood on my porch the next morning watching the empty street where Nancy used to march around like some Stepford general, barking orders and making threats. I didn't feel victorious, not really, just older. Emily was right. Integrity doesn't feel like fireworks lighting up the sky. Sometimes it's just a quiet sigh, a deep breath of relief when the storm finally passes and the world settles back into place. In the weeks that followed, a strange quiet settled over Woodland Pines. Not the tense, fearful quiet Nancy had imposed, but a contemplative one. Neighbors started talking to each other again, not in hushed whispers about HOA violations, but about what kind of community they actually wanted to be. Mavis, bless her heart, spearheaded the formation of a new neighborhood council. No president, no fines, just volunteers organizing the annual potluck and looking out for each other. David helped me draft a simple lease agreement for the access road. $1 a year, renewable at my discretion, payable to a new community fund for park maintenance. There was no need for barricades or tolls. My point had been made. I stood in my front yard a month later, the autumn air crisp and clean. The new fence was almost finished. Not the plastic monstrosity the HOA would have demanded, but solid cedar, much like the one my father built. A few neighbors had even come by to help, unasked. Young Timmy from down the street, whose dad had been hit with a fine for a basketball hoop, was surprisingly good with a hammer. Mavis stopped by with a thermos of coffee and a plate of her famous apple scones. We sat on my porch swing, watching the leaves turn gold and crimson. "You did good, Walter," she said softly, looking at the new fence. "You woke everyone up." "Emily would have liked that," I said, a small smile playing on my lips. I thought of her note. Your true power isn't just in deeds or land, but in your integrity. The fight had been ugly, the cost high for some, but integrity, I hoped, had won. I'd taken the original deed, Emily's note, and a photo of my father standing proudly by his newly built fence all those years ago, and framed them together. They hung in my living room now, a reminder not of the battle but of the foundations, family, legacy, and the quiet strength it takes to protect them. The road into Woodland Pines is just a road again. People drive on it without a second thought, as they always had, but something has changed. There's a lightness in the air, more laughter from kids playing in their yards, more flowers planted just because they're beautiful. Life in Woodland Pines isn't perfect, no place is. But it's ours again. Mine was a quiet rebellion, I suppose, fought not with shouts, but with deeds, both the paper kind and the ones you live by. I didn't set out to be a hero, just a man protecting his home, his memories. But maybe sometimes that's all it takes to remind a community what truly matters. Nancy Whitmore sought control, but she forgot that real power comes from respect, not fear. And respect, like a good fence, has to be earned, and sometimes defended. Emily knew that, and now, so does Woodland Pines.